Cam Battley. He's the Vice President of Aurora. Cam?
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure.
Before Eric leaves, I can see him sneaking out, I wanted to say a couple things about Eric Costin, who works for the organization known as the Secretariat, where he's known as number one. So we kid Eric a little bit, but he's played an enormously important role in a transformative event in Canada. The scale of what we're doing and the pace at which we're doing it is really quite remarkable, and it's not a joke to say that the world is watching us. So I think we should pause for a moment just to pay tribute to the role that Eric has played both with Health Canada and now with the Legalization Secretariat. There are times when there is a moment for a public servant to step forward into a very critical, transformative social role. I think these moments are fairly infrequent, and I think what Eric has done over the past several years and is doing right now is quite significant. So how about a round of applause for Eric? Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Cam. Good points. So our final speaker, I don't know if I finished introducing Cam. Cam's the...
I'm Executive Vice President of Aurora Cannabis and a member of the Board of Directors of Cannabis Canada.
There you have it. Our final speaker is Shane Morse. He's the Quality Assurance Manager and Scientific Affairs at Hydropothecary, and I believe you're also the senior person in charge now, correct?
That is correct. We're working hard all the time.
I know Shane a little bit. He's got a lot of experience in regulatory affairs, and you've held various positions in the government of Canada, I believe, right? Very knowledgeable with regulation. So anyways, I'll open it up to the speakers. The topic is the legislative landscape. I'll start with Ben. Do you have anything to, what's your predictions on the legislative landscape, and what does it mean for the various levels of government?
Okay, I think Eric already gave that overview of the legislation, and it's a critical time from now to July next year, and I think the provincial government is working very hard together and with the federal government try to come up with a regulation that really meets the objectives, take cannabis away from the black market to the legal one, and to protect health safety, public safety, and to come up with a regulation that really meets those objectives. And I think today we're going to cover some of the topics we want to cover is taxation and pricing at minimum age, and those are some of the key issues. I think there are some question marks about, and maybe some different opinions there.
This project that we're engaged in, legalization of the consumer use of cannabis, is a fascinating and multifaceted challenge, and I look at it in a number of different ways. Obviously, I'm an executive with Aurora, a licensed producer, and so I look at it from a business perspective. But I also started my career working as a legislative assistant to a minister here in Ottawa, and so I'm looking at this from a policy perspective too. It's a policy with very clear objectives that the government set out exceedingly clearly and has been consistent about. It's almost model in the way the government has done this. So from the time of the last election campaign, in their platform, they set out their policy objectives to keep cannabis out of the hands of kids, which is really important given that Canada has the highest rate of youth use in the developed world, to remove the profits from criminal organizations, and essentially to take a vast underground market that is unregulated and bring it up into the light of legitimacy and create a legal regulated market, in essence a normal market that protects youth by keeping access to an intoxicant away from them, that protects consumers by ensuring that the products that are consumed in the future are regulated, and normalizes something that we've all been averting our eyes from for decades, the fact that millions of Canadians use cannabis. So from a policy perspective, I find this a fascinating challenge because we do have to get it right. There will be potential backlash if we don't. not everybody is on board. You know, we see poll results suggesting that somewhere between 60 to 70% of Canadians are in favor of the concept of legalization. That means that there's a substantial proportion of society that's not there yet, and we have got to engage with them. At the same time, I think that in order to achieve those policy objectives, we have to think about a number of things beyond the obvious from a business perspective. We have to look beyond the issues of price and taxation and age of access, the distribution systems and so on. And I think we have to take a look at, we have to step back and understand that if we want this to work, we need to embrace the cannabis culture that has been around for an awfully long time. And the advocates and the activists who have been pushing us forward toward a more rational system. I can never forget, when I got into this sector 3 years ago, it was medical cannabis only. And the system existed specifically because of court action, because activists fought through the courts to make it happen. So I owe my job to the pioneers and the activists who pushed through court action to make cannabis available, first on a medical basis, and now we're talking about doing something world-changing by making it available to consumers. And to that end, it strikes me as very important, if we want to achieve our policy objectives collectively as Canadians, and we want to establish a sustainable system, as much as possible, we have to embrace the people who come from the cannabis culture. We have to embrace the people who've been working in this space and thinking about it and have been passionate about it for a very, very long time. We have to make room for small players. This cannot be, the legalization strategy cannot work if it's only massive organizations, if it's only big companies like Aurora, big licensed producers, if it's only big government monopolies in terms of how cannabis is distributed. That's not going to work. We will end up with a black market that will not go away because these people are committed to it. And I think, in essence, we will be smart if we embrace those people, the people who've been working in the cannabis culture, the people who've been working in dispensaries in British Columbia, who know so much about cannabis itself. If we embrace them and bring them in and carve out a role for them, for the little guy, for small and medium enterprises, for entrepreneurs, we'll end up with a better, more effective, and a more sustainable system. That's what I wanted to say to start off.
Great, thanks, Cam. So he's right. There's millions of people that currently use cannabis in the black market. There's a lot of producers that operate illegally right now under grow-at-home licenses, or maybe just outside of the system altogether. Shane, how do you think the legalization regulations can help bring those people into the fold? What do you think the health and safety around that will look like?
First of all, I would echo what my fellow speakers have certainly said, and I would bring you back to something that Eric certainly said, and this is a wicked problem. I'm a policy wonk. I'm 15 years with the federal government. I'm probably the most boring individual you'll ever meet in your life. I live in Barhaven here in Ottawa, so I'm relatively new to this space, but I'm not new to complex, wicked problems that require policy solutions. And this is a classic case. And Canada's doing this first and foremost anywhere in the world, but it needs everybody. The tent needs to be big enough to include all those facets of a wicked problem. A wicked problem is basically like a ball of wool. You pull one piece of string and something else tightens elsewhere. And today I really wanted to touch on the fact that we all have to work together. I have friends and colleagues who deal with this wicked policy problems on a regular basis, and this one, I can tell you, is really a difficult situation. We have a huge amount of work to do. In 18 months, we have to bring legislation through the system, through Parliament, through the Senate. We all know what that looks like in Canada. We have to get a very clear set of regulations in place. So some of the questions that we had earlier, people were getting down into, well, how do I, for example, make edibles? How do I ensure the organic regulations mix correctly with the federal regulations in cannabis? These are all questions that need to be done. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we have to do it under a lot of time pressure. So that tent needs to be big, and we need to get the right people in place as a society and as a country, because we need to actually this past the finish line correctly. I think the issue is, when you come back to the two basic concepts of policy, and I'm going to put people to sleep here, but I'll try not to. The government only has two options. One is regulations as a policy lever, the other is tax. Look at any issue, they're the two levers that government has to pull on a regular basis. So, for me, on one side, the regulation is critical. On the other side, the tax policy, how is really much more complex, and I think needs, Eric alluded to it in his presentation, but we need to start, getting a handle on that, because that impacts huge amounts, everything from how we actually sell cannabis into the future in the recreation market, and then what do we do with that tax revenue? How is it, dispersed at a provincial level? How is it going to be dispersed to help public health initiatives? How is it going to be help to put back into small businesses, as Cameron's related to? Like, what is the tax profile and how is it going to be monitored? So that's, I can continue talking ad nauseum, but I'm probably put everybody asleep. But I think there's, my point is here, we have to work together. To the point about the regulations, I think people have now seen the legislation. It's an exceptionally broad concept. We have 18 months to get regulations through. I used to put through regulations in the federal government, and it could take years. A couple of key things. Don't forget, we have a regulation that was actually, or legislation that was brought through by Anne McLennan many years ago, called the Assisted Human Reproduction Act. Very important. Canada was first in the world. We still don't have any regulations. So I think to actually make this function and function for everybody,